Most of my analysis will be coming from the Jane Austen handbook, Proper Life Skills from Regency England by Margaret C. Sullivan. Mr. Bennet's property consisted almost entirely in an estate of £2,000 a year, which unfortunately for his daughters was entailed in default of heirs male on a distant relation. And their mother's fortune, though ample for her situation in life, could but ill supply the deficiency of his. Her father had been an attorney in Meryton and had left her £4,000. Pride and Prejudice is one of Jane Austen's most famous and well-loved works. Personally, I think her magnum opus is Emma, but that's neither here nor there. I will admit that Emma is a story that is much more simplistic plot-wise when compared to the shenanigans you see in Pride and Prejudice, but I'll save Emma for another video. Tucked away in the folds of that epic romance between Lizzie and Darcy, the romanticized description of Pemberley, very uncommon in Jane Austen's works, and Lydia running off and marrying the handsome but scheming Mr. Wickham, is a realistic subplot involving the financial reality of the Bennet family. Looking at Jane Austen's most famous work, you're supposed to see Mrs. Bennet as a laughable, annoying character obsessed with the prospect of her daughter's marriages, but I think that there is more to her and her motivations than just the bragging rights of having married daughters. Mrs. Bennet, born Miss Gardiner, is the daughter of a country lawyer, which means she actually married up as she was able to secure a landowner for a husband, having likely grown up as the daughter of the less respectable country solicitor as opposed to Emma Woodhouse's brother-in-law John Knightley, an urban barrister. Her family, though, was not without means. She did come with £4,000, a not inconsiderable amount of money at that time, though by no means making her an heiress. However, neither she nor her husband, who had his own yearly income of £2,000 a year, were very economical and instead spent all of their money each year, which meant that there was no provision or dowry made for their daughters. Elizabeth, lively, fun, and intelligent Elizabeth, doesn't seem to take the matter seriously at all, and neither does her father. While the Bennet girls are pretty, they don't really have a pound to their name. Mrs. Bennet's dowry has to be split 5 ways, which is less than £1,000 apiece. And this is barely enough to live on in the way they were accustomed to at Longbourn, where they had some servants, and to Mr. Collins' surprise, a cook. Compare this to Emma Woodhouse, Jane Austen's wealthiest heroine who had a fortune of £30,000, a very substantial income at that time. So unless the Bennet girls all married and married well, they were going to live in genteel poverty, and we don't have to think very hard about what that would look like, because we've already seen it. Have you read Sense and Sensibility? In Sense and Sensibility, the Dashwood girls and their mom, Mrs. Dashwood, had to leave their home and move to a much smaller house, a cottage really, and live off of a very, very small income. And this was the future that the Bennet girls were looking at. But fortunately for them, they got married. In the chapter, How to Provide for Your Daughters and Younger Sons, Sullivan says, an elegant, accomplished, educated lady will be more likely to contract a brilliant marriage with a man of fortune and breeding. If the worst happens, she will be able to make a living as a governess or a teacher in a school. If the Bennet girls did have to work, their options were very limited. They could either be a governess teaching the children of the wealthy for about £20 a year, and room and board and meals, but you would be treated as slightly better than a servant, or a lady's companion, which is a paid associate to a wealthy woman in need of a friend, or, as the name indicates, a companion. So, with all of this information that I've now presented, I think it's kinda clear that Mrs. Bennet actually has a lot to worry about, and the reality is, we ridicule her without ever paying attention to Mr. Bennet because we're supposed to like him since he's Elizabeth's preferred parent. And well, Elizabeth is the protagonist, so we're supposed to like who she likes and dislike who she doesn't like. Mr. Bennet is a failure in his own right, and I feel like we need to discuss that. Colonel Brandon, in Sense and Sensibility, also has the same income as he does, but doesn't seem to have the same financial issues with getting by. It's almost as if Mr. Bennet has pretty much given up on ever being able to do or be better than he is. He simply locks himself in his library and leaves everyone to fend for themselves. Even if he claims to love Elizabeth and feel indifferent to both his wife and his other daughters, he certainly doesn't act like it because he doesn't make much of an effort to even provide for Elizabeth. A prudent father would have saved part of his yearly income to provide for his daughters, but Mr. Bennet had depended on having a son to break the entailment and therefore did not save anything. Most men expected their brides to have a dowry or the expectation of an inheritance, and the 5 Bennet sisters had only the expectation of dividing their mother's personal fortune of £4,000 after her death. The Bennet ladies enjoyed a comfortable lifestyle while Mr. Bennet lived, but they were placed at a disadvantage in the marriage market by having such small expectations. If they remained unmarried when Mr. Bennet died, they would be left without a home and very little money. One might nurture a Jane Bennet-ish hope that Mr. Collins would provide some assistance to the widow and orphans, though probably in vain. So why aren't we as readers or film viewers more critical of Mr. Bennet? To be fair, Mrs. Bennet is a very easy target. She was clearly a very ineffective mother. Her 2 youngest daughters were pretty much out of control, and Mary in the middle was starved for attention. But why do we all laugh at her and mock her? Dr. Laurie Umansky, a history professor and co-author of the book Bad Mothers, The Politics of Blame in the 20th Century, says, part of the blaming of mothers lies in the gender structure of child rearing, with mothers doing most of the labor still associated with children. Mrs. Bennet at least looked at the reality of her and her husband's situation and knew that the only way to ensure comfort for her children was for them to marry well, as she herself had done. There was no university degree to read for with a career at the end. There was marriage, or as Jane Fairfax says in Emma, there are places in town, offices where inquiry would soon produce something, offices for the sale not quite of human flesh, but of human intellect. Basically the humdrum life of a governess. I think without a good marriage, the Bennet girls were destined to become governesses or ladies' companions or school teachers because they really didn't have much resources, and to be honest, they would have been very bad teachers because they lacked the education. Mrs. Bennet didn't seem to have any accomplishments herself, and she didn't get a governess for her children, so the children never quite learned any of the real skills that they required in order to even make themselves good governesses. So, while Mrs. Bennet is silly in her own way and did want the bragging rights of saying that she got her daughters not just married, but well married, I do think that there is a sense of urgency to the situation that she has that her husband lacks, and I do think that makes her a better parent all round. Thank you so much for watching this video until the end. I know this is like so different from stuff that I normally make, like more social justice stuff, but I like a lot of different things, and I guess the thing about a brand new channel is that you try different things and you get to see what works and what doesn't. So yeah, I love Jane Austen, and I'll definitely be making more Jane Austen content in the future. Tell me what your favorite Jane Austen novel is, or Jane Austen film. I want to know. Let's talk about it. Bye bye.